And it really all starts with some really simple yet powerful questions that are posed in the Bhaja Govindam.
Okay.
And the questions are these. Who are you? Who am I? Where have I come from?
Hmm.
Who's my mother? Who is my father?
Right. And these might seem like questions that have really easy answers,
Yeah.
but when you actually stop and think about them, they really get to the heart of how we define ourselves. Like how do we figure out who we are?
Yeah, it's like hitting the reset button on our self-perception. But then it takes even more of a fascinating turn because the verse continues and says, thus contemplate upon your own world of existence.
Okay.
Abandon all of this and reflect upon the thought of the world as a dream.
Wow.
So are we saying that everything we experience, our relationships, our jobs, this whole world is just an illusion?
Well, the idea of Maya or illusion in the Advaita Vedanta tradition is a little more nuanced than that, I think. It's not necessarily that it's denying the reality of our experiences, It's more that it's trying to get us to recognize how temporary and how ever-changing they are. I think a good analogy for this is like a movie projected onto a screen. The images are real, they evoke emotions in us, but they're ultimately fleeting projections. They're dependent on a source that's beyond the screen itself.
Yeah, that's a helpful way to think about it. So if
Yeah.
everything around us is like this passing projection, who are we in this grand cosmic cinema?
Right. That's where the idea of the Atman or the true self comes in. The Advaita Vedanta tradition proposes that our true essence is pure consciousness, that it's unchanging and eternal. And it's beyond, the confines of our physical body or our thoughts or emotions. So we're not our fleeting feelings or, constantly shifting thoughts, but rather the awareness that experiences all of those things.
So instead of getting caught up in the drama on the screen, we should be focusing on understanding the projector itself.
Yeah.
That's a pretty radical shift in perspective.
It is.
But what about those initial questions about family and origins?
Right.
Surely those connections to others are significant.
Yeah, they definitely hold significance within this movie that we call life.
Yeah.
But from the Advaita Vedanta viewpoint, even our most cherished relationships exist within the realm of Maya. They're real in the context of our experience, but they ultimately don't define that eternal, unchanging essence of who we are.
So if our true self isn't defined by our roles or our experiences or relationships, what does that mean for how we navigate the world? Does it mean we should just detach from everything and everyone around us? Not exactly. I think Advaita Vedanta isn't about rejecting life or becoming emotionless, It's more about understanding the true nature of reality, and recognizing the impermanence of all things, including this perceived self that we have.
Okay.
It's about, experiencing life fully with all of its joys and sorrows, but not getting so entangled in the drama of it all that we lose sight of who we are at our core.
Yeah, I'm starting to see how this ties into this whole world as a dream analogy that, if we understand that the movie will eventually end, maybe we can appreciate the show without necessarily clinging to every scene or character.
Precisely. It's about finding a balance between engagement and detachment, embracing the richness of life, without letting those, fleeting ups and downs define our sense of self.
That's fascinating.
Yeah.
So we've covered this idea of the world as a dream. We've touched on Maya, this concept of the Atman, but how do we actually shift our perspective to see things through this Advaita Vedanta lens?
Yeah.
Is there a practical way to access this deeper understanding of ourselves? Well, that's where the practice of self-inquiry, or what's called Atma Vichara in this tradition, comes in.
Okay.
And that is a conversation for next time.
All right. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too.
So before we took a break, we were really starting to kind of unravel this idea of Atma Vichara or self-inquiry
Right.
as a path toward understanding our true selves in this whole Advaita Vedanta framework. I have to admit, the concept is intriguing,
Yeah.
but it also feels a bit abstract.
Yeah.
What does self-inquiry actually look like in practice?
It's really about cultivating a deeper awareness of our internal landscape. Our thoughts, our emotions, even physical sensations, but without getting swept away by them. Imagine sitting by a river and observing the current. You see the water flowing, the leaves drifting by, but you don't jump in and get carried away by the current. You remain the observer.
So instead of immediately identifying with every thought or emotion that pops up, we're learning to simply acknowledge its presence without judgment.
Right. Exactly. It's like watching clouds drift across the sky. We see them, we acknowledge their various shapes and forms, but we understand that they're temporary.
Right.
And they'll eventually pass. We don't try to cling to them or push them away.
That makes sense. So much of our stress and anxiety stems from over-identifying with our thoughts and kind of letting our emotions dictate our actions.
Yeah.
It sounds like self-inquiry is about creating some breathing room between ourselves and that internal whirlwind.
It is. And there are many paths to cultivating this awareness.
Yeah.
Meditation, for example, is a powerful tool for training the mind to become still and observe the constant influx of thoughts without getting caught in their stories.
Yeah, meditation is something I've dabbled in, but I often struggle with quieting my mind.
Sure.
Are there other approaches to self-inquiry that might be a little easier to incorporate into daily life?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Journaling can be incredibly beneficial. The simple act of putting your thoughts and feelings into words on paper can create distance and allow you to observe them more objectively.
It's like having a conversation with yourself, but in a way that allows for reflection and analysis.
Yeah.
What are some other techniques that you found helpful?
Simply becoming more present in your daily life can be a powerful form of self-inquiry. Pay attention to your senses. Notice the colors and the textures and the scents around you. Savor the taste of your food. Really listen to the sounds that you encounter throughout your day. By consciously engaging with the present moment, you naturally create space between yourself and that constant stream of thoughts.
It's about slowing down and actually experiencing life instead of going through the motions on autopilot.
Yeah.
I can see how that could be a form of self-inquiry. Are there any particular strategies that you would suggest for someone wanting to cultivate that present moment awareness?
One practice I find helpful is to choose a simple everyday activity and bring full awareness to it. It could be brushing your teeth, washing the dishes, or taking a walk. Engage all your senses. Notice the sensations, the sounds, the smells. Don't let your mind wander to your to-do list or worries about the future. Just be fully present in that moment.
I love that. It's about finding those pockets of mindfulness even in the most ordinary routines.
Yeah.
It sounds like the key is consistency. The more we practice tuning into the present moment, the more natural it becomes to observe our thoughts and emotions without getting swept away.
Exactly. And as you become more adept at observing your internal world, you'll likely start to notice recurring patterns in your thinking, limiting beliefs that may be holding you back.
Yeah.
By simply becoming aware of these patterns, you can begin to loosen their grip.
This reminds me of something we discussed earlier, the concept of impermanence and how Advaita Vedanta views the world as this constantly changing flow of experiences. It seems like self-inquiry helps us to recognize that our thoughts and emotions are also part of this flow, arising and passing away like waves on the ocean.
Yes, recognizing the transient nature of all things, including our internal states, is key to cultivating detachment.
Okay, so detachment in this context doesn't mean becoming emotionless or indifferent. It's about shifting our relationship with our thoughts and emotions.
Yeah. Think of it like learning to surf. You don't try to control the waves or get rid of them.
Okay.
You learn to ride them.
Right.
To navigate their power without getting pulled under.
That's a great analogy. But this idea of detachment is a bit tricky for me. Doesn't it contradict the idea of being fully present and engaged with life?
It's a common misconception.
Yeah.
Detachment in the Advaita Vedanta tradition isn't about withdrawing from the world or suppressing our emotions. It's about engaging with life fully, but without clinging to outcomes.
Okay.
Or letting external circumstances dictate our inner peace.
So it's about finding that balance between experiencing the richness of life, the joys, the sorrows, the connections,
right,
but while recognizing that all of it is in constant flux.
Yeah.
Like this beautiful dance of impermanence.
Exactly. And with this understanding comes a profound shift. We can still experience sadness or anger or joy, but those emotions no longer have the power to define us. We become the observer, the awareness that experiences it all without getting lost in the story.
This is all starting to click. But I have to ask, what are some of the benefits of living with this level of awareness and detachment?
Well, for one, it often leads to a deeper sense of inner peace and freedom. When you're not constantly reacting to every thought or emotion, you develop a sense of calmness and equanimity that isn't dependent on external circumstances.
That sounds incredible. I think we could all use a little more peace and equanimity in our lives.
Absolutely.
Oh.
And when you're not so attached to outcomes, you're less likely to experience disappointment or frustration when things don't go as planned.
So it's not about avoiding challenges or difficult emotions, but rather approaching them with a different mindset, a sense of acceptance that whatever arises will eventually pass.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that both the pleasant and the unpleasant are temporary visitors in the grand scheme of things.
This makes me think about how we often hold on to grudges or past hurts.
Yeah,
Maybe if we had a deeper understanding of impermanence, we could let go of those things more easily.
that's a great insight. By realizing that everything is constantly changing, we can loosen our grip on the past and embrace the present moment more fully.
This has been incredibly insightful. We've discussed how self-inquiry helps us recognize the impermanence of our thoughts and emotions, leading to a sense of detachment that allows us to experience life more fully without being ruled by external circumstances. But the Bhaja Govindam verse also talks about abandoning all of this. What does that mean in the context of our conversation so far? Is it about becoming a hermit and renouncing all worldly possessions?
Not quite. That's where things get even more interesting.
So before the break, we were talking about this really intriguing idea in the Bhaja Govindam verse,
Yeah.
this concept of abandoning all of this.
Right.
And it really sparks some questions, especially, when we've been talking about embracing life and experiencing it fully.
It does seem a little paradoxical, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But I think, like many aspects of Advaita Vedanta, it requires a shift in how we typically think about things.
So it's not about literally packing a bag and heading for the mountains, right?
Right.
What does abandoning all of this actually mean in the context of this philosophy?
You're right. It's not about physical renunciation.
Oh, yeah.
It's about a much deeper letting go.
Yeah.
It's a releasing of our attachment to this idea that our happiness and our fulfillment are dependent on external things.
Yeah.
Possessions, achievements, relationships, even our own identities.
So it ties back into this concept of detachment that we were discussing before,
Yeah.
but on an even deeper level.
Yeah, exactly.
That even those things that we hold most dear are ultimately temporary,
Right.
and they can't provide lasting happiness.
Exactly. Remember that movie analogy that we talked about?
Yeah.
It's like realizing that we're not the characters on the screen, but the awareness that witnesses the whole film.
Mm-hmm.
The drama, the romance, the
Yeah.
heartbreak. It's all part of the story.
Right.
But it doesn't define the essence of who we are.
That's a really powerful image. It's about shifting our focus from the content of the movie to the experience of watching it. But how does one even begin to, abandon those things that seem so central to our lives?
Right.
Our roles, our relationships, our sense of self.
It starts with awareness. I think as we practice self-inquiry and cultivate detachment, we naturally begin to see the limitations of trying to find our fulfillment in external things. We start to recognize that, those things are constantly changing, and clinging to them only leads to suffering when they inevitably shift or disappear.
It's about letting go of that constant need to grasp, to control, to hold on.
Yeah.
And instead, learning to appreciate those things for what they are.
Yeah.
Temporary expressions of a much larger, more profound reality.
Precisely. It's not about, denying the importance of relationships or achievements. It's about recognizing their place within the grand scheme of things.
Right.
They're part of the dance of life, but they're not the dancer.
This reminds me of something we talked about earlier, the idea that our true self, the Atman, is pure consciousness, unchanging and eternal. It seems like abandoning all of this is about aligning ourselves with that deeper awareness, rather than getting caught up in those, kind of fleeting dramas of the external world.
Yes. It's about recognizing that true freedom comes not from acquiring more, but from letting go of that need to define ourselves through these external markers.
Right.
It's about finding our security and our happiness in something much deeper, something that transcends this ever-changing landscape of our experiences.
So it's not about becoming an emotionless robot or withdrawing from the world.
No.
It's about living fully embracing all that life has to offer, but with a sense of detachment.
Right.
A recognition that our true essence is beyond the reach of those external fluctuations.
Beautifully put. It's about finding that sweet spot between engagement and detachment, between experiencing the fullness of life and recognizing its ultimately transient nature.
Wow, this has been such an incredible exploration of Advaita Vedanta. We've covered so much ground. The world is a dream. The concept of Maya the Atman, the practices of self-inquiry and detachment, and this intriguing idea of abandoning all of this, it's definitely given me a lot to think about.
It's a philosophy rich with depth and nuance, and it offers a truly unique perspective on, life, the self, and our place in the universe.
And as we've been discussing, it's not just about intellectual understanding. It's about incorporating these principles into our daily life, experimenting with the practices and seeing how they can help us navigate the world, with more peace, freedom, and joy.
Absolutely. The real magic unfolds when we move from theory to practice.
Well, dear listeners, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into Advaita Vedanta.
Yeah.
We've explored some really profound concepts and hopefully sparked some curiosity about this ancient philosophy and its relevance to our modern lives.
It's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you. May your journey of self-discovery be filled with insight, wonder, and a growing sense of connection to this vast and mysterious universe we inhabit.
Beautifully said. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep exploring the depths of your own being.